Yo, welcome back to another video. In today's video, this is going over update 6.5's guide for world lines. If you have read the title, in this video there will be helpful information about overall good units to use, unit lists for each weather effect, and information about specific stages and bosses. This will be like the first half of the video. The second half will be going over floor 30 to 50, and I think a couple floors before that. I'm going to skip out a whole bunch of the early floors because that's not really needed. It's more the later floors that people are struggling with, or just in general when it comes to world lines, so that's why I'm doing this. Before we get into the segments though, I want to preface a couple things beforehand. Certain parts of this video will most likely be resaid. This is because I'm expecting people not to fully watch this video in its entirety and will be using the chapters to get the information that they need. So going over a couple more notes before we get into the video. The first thing is that this guide is not the way to complete world lines, it's simply a way to beat it. There are many different combinations of units you can use to climb and reach floor 50. My way that I am using is what I believe to be just a very simple and easily obtainable units to use way to beat it, I guess. The next thing is that my climb that I do in this guide is done without any traits, familiars, no exclusive or Vanguard units. You do not need to follow my exact units when climbing the floors. I'm just using this as a demonstration to show you that you do not need to have the best units to be able to reach floor 50. World lines floor 50 is definitely fully achievable with less slots. You can probably do it at 4, even 3 slots. I'm pretty sure I would be able to do it at 4 with my team that I was using, but when I was climbing I ended up using all 5 slots, but I never used all 4 units and my farm on a single floor. I believe I just didn't want to have to swap between my units in and out all the time, so that's why I just kept with 5 slots. And lastly, with this kind of first part, I'd highly advise you to use all your units you have available to you. If you have good secrets, exclusives, if you have Vanguard units, please use them and do not limit yourself to what I'm doing, because I am making it harder for myself for no reason really. It's just as a demonstration, as I said. So for the first segment, we'll be going over the units lists for each weather buff and an overall good units to use in world lines. With these unit lists, this is purely my opinion on what units I believe are usable and I would recommend using. This is not a tier list, so to say, mostly based on no traits, because I'm not expecting everyone to have the best traits. For these unit lists, each of the weather buffs, they are separated into their own elements with the units in no particular order. Units that I would not recommend using, and also units that are mainly only for supports, and units that are mainly support from those respective elements. Like I said, I do have a do not recommend section. If you have a monarch on one of those units that I have and do not recommend, most likely they will still be performing very well in those respective element buffs, but like I said, I'm looking at this with no traits. So let's get straight into the first list. Here is the Blizzard unit list. First thing to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective element buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Blizzard weather effect gives a nature and fire elemental buff and a water and unbound elemental debuff. All water units attack apply a freeze, and enemies cannot be affected by any other CC. Here is the Flood unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Flood weather effect gives a water and spark elemental buff and a fire elemental debuff. All spark units attacks apply a stun, and enemies cannot be burned and gain movement speed after getting stunned or being hit by a water unit. Here is the Full Moon unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Full Moon weather effect gives an unbound and curse elemental buff and a nature and holy elemental debuff. All unbound units attacks apply a bleed, and enemies have a 40% chance to dodge attacks unless they are in range of a holy unit. Here is the Infinite Tsukuyomi unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Infinite Tsukuyomi weather effect gives an unbound and passion elemental buff and no elemental debuff. You can only place unbound, passion, and unknown element units. Units gain 3% damage per wave, and enemies gain 2% movement speed per unit attack. Here is the Love Train unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Love Train weather effect gives a Passion and Holy elemental buff and a Curse and Nature elemental debuff. Once per wave, units will have their damage set to 0 for 2 attacks. Units hit by this effect will gain CC immunity for the rest of the stage. Here is the Made in Heaven unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Made in Heaven weather effect gives a Holy and Cosmic elemental buff and a Curse and Unbound elemental debuff. All units will reduce their SPA by 1% per attack up to a max of 20%, and enemies gain movement speed per wave. Here is the Rain unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Rain weather effect gives a Water and Spark elemental buff and a Fire elemental debuff. All Spark units attacks apply a stun, and enemies cannot be burned and have a 15% dodge chance. Here's the Rift in Time units list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Rift in Time weather effect gives a Passion and Curse elemental buff and a Blast and Nature elemental debuff. Doubles the enemy spawns with 25% less HP. Champion modifier is active and you can select stat increase cards every 4 waves. Here is the Snow unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on this list. The Snow weather effect gives a Water and Fire elemental buff and a Nature elemental debuff. All enemies have a permanent 10% slow and cannot be frozen or repulsed. Here is the Sunshine unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Sunshine weather effect gives a Fire and Nature elemental buff and a Water and Unbound elemental debuff. All Holy units gain 8% damage every wave they have been placed down, and enemies cannot be frozen or slowed. Here is the Thunderstorm unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs from that weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on these lists. The Thunderstorm weather effect gives a Spark and Blast elemental buff and a Fire and Passion elemental debuff. If an enemy gets hit by a Spark unit, then a Blast unit, they will take extra damage and get stunned, and enemies resist all CC that isn't stun and have increased movement speed. Here is the Windstorm unit list. First things to note, this is not a tier list but a recommended units list based on the respective elemental buffs for the weather type, and no update 6.5 units will be on this list. The Windstorm weather effect gives a Nature and Spark elemental buff and a Blast and Fire elemental debuff. Enemies have increased movement speed, and Repulse sends back enemies twice as far and make them take 20% more damage. Next up, we have our overall good units list. These are good units regardless of the weather effect. Only thing to keep in mind is that you do not want to be using your damaging units if they are debuffed for the stage, with the exception of Uryu. So briefly going over this list, for our carry row, these are units that you would put most of your econ into, and most of the time they should reliably be able to beat the floor. There are other units that definitely can be in here, but I did not want to create a huge list. Most of these are secrets, but I've picked out 2 exclusive and 2 mythic units that I believe are also very strong and should be able to carry you on these floors. The starter / placement row are units that are good on placement or after a couple upgrades. This is mainly just Yamamoto for that. I would also like to note, for Boo, it's specifically Kid Boo. You just need to place down a Boo and sell him to instantly transform him into Kid Boo. This is for a good cheap full AoE. And for Gohan, if you want to use him, you would want to use him alongside a rare unit that can be placed on wave 1. This is so he will be placed as well due to his passive. Gohan is mainly only here for really early floors to speed up the early waves. He also does not need to be evolved, he just needs to be leveled up to be able to use him. Our placement supports are units with buffs on placement, our investment supports are units with buffs after certain upgrades, and our alt supports are good CC, bleed, more damage / summon supports. Okay, so onto the next segment, we'll be talking about stage and the enemy mutators. The stage that we'll be going over is the Dragon Ball Z stages, being Marshall Island and Land of the Gods. These stages introduced 3 new mutators, that being Challenger, Energy Drain, and Absorption. So, Bopo Itch are the enemies on these stages that have the Challenger mutator. This mutator resists summons. They are immune to damage from basic summons like Yamamoto, Giselle's, and Sung Jin Woo's Arise, and many more, and take 50% reduced damage from elite summons like Sung Jin Woo's named summons and the Berserker summon. Yomo are the enemies on these stages that have Energy Drain mutator. This mutator reduces units damage by 5% per hit when attacking a enemy. This debuff can be cleansed, and debuff immune, spark, and unknown elemental units are immune to Energy Drain. All boos except Kid Buu on these stages have the Absorption mutator. This mutator makes any non-elite summon that the boss runs into heal the boss based on the summon's health instead of dealing damage. The next thing I want to talk about is the bosses from these stages. First thing is the Babidi boss. Babidi has a unique mechanic called Mind Control. When Babidi spawns in, he will steal a unit with the highest displayed damage and convert it into an enemy with its health based on the damage stat. The unit will be reverted once you defeat the converted units. To help counter this boss, it is recommended to upgrade and use as little yen as possible to reach wave 15. Once the boss spawns in, you can spend all your yen to upgrade your units and defeat it. Next is all the boot bosses. Aside from the Absorption mutator, all the boos have regen. This regen is very strong, and if they have enough health, it is very hard to outdamage the regen. There are 3 options you can use to stop this regen. The first option is bleed. Bleed will stop regen as long as it's on the enemy. This is a good option as most bleed units can achieve this in the game. The second option is the Roger Familiar. This lets any unit be able to permanently stop a percentage of the regen from happening, but it's not really recommended, as if the boss's HP is too high, the regen will still be pretty big. And the last option is Rupture. This is a special effect that 2 units have in the game. This is Vegito and Lanza. Vegito is not really recommended to use if you're specifically wanting Rupture for a wave 15 stage, so the unit you want to be using is Lanza. What Rupture does is it prevents enemies from regenerating permanently. Lanza does not have this on placement. You do need to get him to upgrade 7. This costs around 28,000 yen without fortune on him. This is very good against all bosses with regen. Alright, and with that, hopefully with all that information that has been said, I hope this is helpful. Next up in the video, I will be going over my climb that I did. I'll probably not be talking for the rest of this video, but there should be things on the screen for each floor that can be useful, so let's get straight into it. Alright, and that is pretty much the end of this video. I have done the guide. I hope you have enjoyed. If you have watched this entirety or have watched last floor and now you're watching the end of this video, I appreciate it if you have watched this far through the video. See ya.